How are you? Today we're going to have a very interesting, in my opinion, a very interesting class. Where did you spend Rosh Hashanah? You're more than welcome to share with me. Write to me um, an email or WhatsApp, whatever works for you. So, as you know, over the past few days, I've been dealing with a rather stubborn virus. So I'll be speaking a bit more quietly today. But thank God I'm feeling good enough, feeling much better, and feeling good enough to record this class. And in 2 days will be the next class, dealing with Amachteret Hayehudit, the Jewish underground terrorist organization. We will not go ahead of ourselves. So, as always, the discussion this week was fascinating. I make sure to read everything that you write. I also want to draw your attention to some resources. Rabbi Shlomo Aviner's book, which contains teachings and ideas of Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, is available in English and has been uploaded in full to the course site under the link for week 2. If there are any issues with that, please let me know. In addition, I uploaded several articles on Gush Emunim to the week 4 link, right? Our this session's week. The content I present to you in class is what I consider essential, while the reading materials are meant for enrichment. As I've mentioned before, there is no obligation to read everything I upload. Please see all of it as optional enrichment for your learning. And one more note, I noticed that some of you already began posting in the discussion for this week's lesson even before the video was uploaded. So well done, kol hakavod. That's absolutely fine, but I will only get to read those posts later this week. And this week, I chose to focus on 3 points that came up in our discussion. The first one is at least one of you, right, noted that the settlement movement can be explained in many ways, and not only the theological, but and yes, I agree, it can be also explained psychologically, politically, economically, culturally. And in this course, I'm focusing on the theological aspects, but that does not deny the importance of the others. So this is important for me to stress. Any phenomenon can and should be examined from multiple angles. My emphasis on theology is simply a way of shining the spotlight on one dimension that I see as central, while encouraging you to highlight others as well. The second point, there was another comment raised deep concern about Rav Tzvi Yehuda's preference for a state governed by halacha, right? A medinat halacha. And here, I would like to draw on Rav Menachem Fruman, who argued that sometimes even very radical positions can open space for dialogue if people are willing to suspend their messianic vision and leave it in God's hand, right? So they do not deny the messianic vision, they just acknowledge the fact that this is left to God's hands. So the key question in my eyes is whether the belief translates into political political action in the present, or whether it remains a long-term eschatological hope. So many times this is a long-term hope. We can think of other examples, maybe of Christian evangelical views of the second coming of Jesus. So many times there's this alliance between evangelical Christians and parts of religious Zionism, for instance, And they both realize that they have a very different, contradictive, eschatological hope. But as long as they're both aware of it and they have a common goal to work on in the present, so it can be done. The third point is there was a comment who challenged Rav Tzvi claim that the state of Israel is what the prophets foresaw, pointing to the state's imperfections. So my response would be that Tzvi Yehuda does not mean this is the complete redemption, the Geula Hashlema, but rather it's a beginning, Reshit, Tzmichat Geulatenu, Atchalta de Geula, redemption, in his view, is already here, but as a process. The state is the material starting point that the prophets anticipated. So it's the material starting point. Though clearly there is more work to be done. And as always, I cannot respond to every point raised, whether in writing or in a video. So each week I select a few issues to highlight. But if you brought up something that I did not address and you would like me to respond, please let me know. And I will be happy to do so. And thanks again, all of you, really. For the discussion. I learn a lot. I enjoy a lot. And please continue. And I read every single word. And I love it. So what are we going to do today? We will have only one video. It's going to be a long video. So I hope you made your coffee. I discovered lately the black coffee, not the Americano, but the black coffee. Uh, I always liked it and enjoyed it, but I kind of like it even more lately. I don't know why. Probably there are phases in life, right? Coffee phases. Um, Now, the first part will present some of the different research approaches to Gush Emunim. If you would like to add other scholarly perspectives in the discussion, I would be very glad. I encourage that. Many scholars have found Gush Emunim to be a subject of great importance. In fact, I found articles in academic databases already in the late 70s, right? That they were analyzing Gush Emunim. Remember, Gush Emunim established 1974, and already a couple of years, 3 years later, we have scholarly papers analyzing Gush Emunim as such, as Gush Emunim as a movement. And that itself, I think, is very interesting to see how research itself has looked at Gush Emunim over the years. Every year, several new texts on the subject are published. Unfortunately, I do not know them all, though I do try to keep up. The concept of Gush Emunim, here's just another point I want to raise, is so very broad. And its boundaries are not always clear concerning its beginnings. Formally, the movement, and we will touch upon this very soon, the movement was established in 1974, but even earlier, there were actions and statements that belong to its wider story concerning its end as well, right? We're speaking about historical boundaries, lines, so concerning its end. Can we even speak of the end of Gush Emunim? And if so, when does that occur? And should what followed be seen as a direct, gradual continuation, or rather as a shift in religious Zionism direction? This is, of course, connected to the broader question we already discussed about continuity. Sometimes to continue someone's legacy means to change because the circumstances change, obviously. And another point, a hilltop youth currently living on a hill near Elon Moreh, for instance, may never have even heard of Gush Emunim. Not every religious Zionist knows in which year the movement was founded or how it developed. for such people, we're speaking simply about life itself, and this is obviously true not only to this movement we're speaking about, um, but it's always, the dilemma and always the gap between scholarship, critical thought, critical reading, and analyzing and life, right? So for people, many times in religious Zionism, um, so we have a critical distance that allows us to analyze and describe what happened, when happened, and what influenced what, right? So here, as I said, I'm speaking more in theological influence, but we have also historical and financial and political influences. But in the end, life itself distills the ethos. Concepts like time, development, and gradual process are irrelevant to someone who comes this very morning to pray shacharit in the settlement of Shiloh, for instance, which, by the way, my parents were among the founders of. So now let's talk about a few research perspectives. Formally, Gush Emunim was established, and we were going to get back to this again and again and again, and I'm already apologizing for being a bit repetitive in today's class. Sometimes being repetitive will also allow us to memorize these dates, these um, um, important dates better. So formally, Gush Emunim was established in early 1974, yet its vision was already expressed in 1967 with a renewed settlement in Kfar Etzion, right? So I'm not speaking about now the war, I'm speaking about Kfar Etzion, and later, in 1968, also, I will mention this again, the Park Hotel in Hebron. Hebron, right? Led by Rabbi Moshe Levinger. His wife Miriam Levinger and their followers who reestablished the Jewish settlement there. Some scholars, like Gidon Aran, you can see his book here, Kukism in Hebrew. Um, so he argues that the roots go back to the 50s, to the 1950s, with a group called Gachelet, founded in the Kfar Haroeh. Haroeh stands for Rav Avraham HaKohen, right? Avraham Yitzchak Cohen, Rav Kook, the father. So it was founded in a village called Kfar Haroeh, in the yeshiva in Kfar Haroeh, which included people like Moshe Levinger, Hanan Porat. Again, you do not have to remember all of these names. Some of them are more important, and you will keep hearing them again and again during the course until eventually you will know them all. Eliezer Waldman, Chaim Druckmann, they emphasized rigorous Torah study in contrast to their more the parents that were they in contrast to their parents were more into Torah study and pioneering ethos, the Chalutzim ethos. Still, most scholarship places the roots in 1967, and I tend to agree with that. Yes, we can always go back more and more in time, and Gachele definitely has to do with the people who eventually founded Gush Emunim, but if we're looking for an immediate, direct roots, beginnings, I would go back to 1967, but it's important to also mention Gidon Aran, a very, very nice person. We had coffee together a year ago in Tel Aviv. Very interesting. Very interesting perspective, very interesting person. Another point. So let's go back to Gidon Aran. He was one of the first to study Gush Emunim, and he argued in his dissertation, his PhD dissertation, 1987. It's extremely recommended to read the Hebrew dissertation. The book is really not even, I mean, the dissertation is highly recommended. If I forget to upload it, please remind me. Please remind me. I have it. I would love to. Unfortunately, it's only in Hebrew, the dissertation. It's fascinating. Um, okay. And I spoke to some of the rabbis from Haramor and from Merkaz Harav about Gidon Aran. There are some interesting things to say about what exactly happened there. Did they know he is writing a PhD about them or not? Okay, that's a big question. Okay, whoever wants, you can write to me in person, and we can speak about that. And the book, and even though he published his PhD 1987, the book you see here was only published in 2013. So 26 years later, okay, 26 years later, um, and he argued in his dissertation that the Six-Day War was the formative event, um, a messianism of success. And other people like Avi Ravitsky, also a renowned Jewish studies scholar, uh, unfortunately was involved in a very difficult tragedy, car accident, and he today is, between life and death for many years, and it's just a terrible tragedy. Also an amazing person and a big loss for Jewish studies and for whoever knew him. Um, and he also agreed. So we're speaking here of messianism of success, משיחיות של הצלחה, Gush Emunim as a movement who emerges out of success. But Moti in Bari also speaking to him lately. Some of you might also know him personally. Wrote much about religious Zionism and Gush Emunim. I think I even uploaded at least one or two of his papers, and he pointed out the problem. Gush Emunim was founded in 1974, 7 years later, 7 years after the Six-Day War. And in his view, it was not born, Gush Emunim was not born of success, but of fear. So it's messianism of fear of losing that success, as territorial compromises were already on the agenda, and I tend to agree with Professor Moti Inbari on this. Another point is regarding the end of Gush Emunim. So the movement began to dissolve in the 1980s. Again, I'm going to repeat this point later. Linked to Rav Tzvi Kook's death. He passed away 1982. This is also something you should remember. There's some dates I want you to memorize. I want you to come out of this course knowing Rav Tzvi passed away in 1982. So this is just before Yamit, Sinai, um, just before the Sinai events we're going to speak about. So I'm not going to elaborate right now. So there was the evacuation, right, from Sinai, and before the Jewish underground, the Machteret HaYehudit, which we will discuss next week. So its influence spread among different rabbis and executive bodies such as the Yesha, Yehuda Shomron Aza, Yesha, Council, Moetzet Yesha, and Amana. Now, Asaf Harel, also someone that I recommend reading, criticized the fact that research still focuses on Gush Emunim's messianic ideology when discussing the settlements, right? When discussing the settlement, while overlooking other forces such as neoliberalism that contributed to their growth. he reminds us, and I think one of you at least also mentioned it um, somewhere in the discussion, that most settlers, most of the mitnachalim today are not religious Zionism. Are not religious Zionism. We have cities like Ariel, we have cities like Kiryat Sefer, Modi'in Eilit. We have cities that are Haredi, right, ultra Orthodox. We have settlements that are Chiloni, Masorti, secular, traditional. Um, but it did not start out like that. So, right, he also critiques the continued use of the term Gush Emunim, which he says homogenizes a very diverse population. Now, I agree with him. Here we're talking about a historical movement, Gush Emunim, its rise and decline. And later we will examine the important internal differences in religious Zionism after, post Gush Emunim. Harel is right that Messianism remains a central force and that it is diverse. I would add that it was already diverse from the very beginning. Okay? Another point, scholars describe Gush Emunim as a model of mysticism that does not seek to withdraw into otherworldly realms, but rather directs itself towards a concrete national mission, redemption through uniting the people and the land as one living body. And another point, in much of the scholarship, Gush Emunim is eulogized as a movement that never grew beyond a few tens of thousands, with pessimism heightened by the disengagement of 2005, also something we will touch upon later, the rise of formerly religious, the Tlash, the Tiyum L'Shavar youth, and the Hilltop youth. Also, we will conclude the session today with a similar statement from Tomer Persico, and I will ask you what you think about it. Personally, I think this discussion needs to be reopened after October 7th. I believe we're witnessing a revival of many values and a messianic discourse that had been pushed to the margins of religious Zionism consciousness, but are now returning. In fact, I will give a course about Mashiach now, Messianism today, this coming semester. In Israel, we start the semester on October after the holidays, the Chagim. So in a few weeks, I will start giving a lecture, a course. It will be in Hebrew in the Ben Gurion University of the Negev. If any of you happen to be, it's in person, right? It's not hybrid. But if any of you want to join and you're here in Israel, please feel free to join. We have here also a Professor Avinoam Rosnak, wrote a very interesting book named Stakim. I'm pretty sure you have full access to Stakim through Kotar, Koter. Please see if you can access this. This is a Hebrew written book through Gratz College. If not, then I can access the book. I also have the hard copy, but if you want, you can look at the table of content, and I will be happy to upload it. And it also is a general comment. I can access many books. If there are anything that I can upload, and I'm happy to do so. So let's return to the peak. Let's return to Gush Emunim. Here you can see Rav Moshe Levinger with the suit, taller than the rest, and Moshe Dayan next to him in Kiryat Arba near Hebron, 1974. Okay, let's return to Gush Emunim. even before the Gush, as we said, the Gush Emunim was formally established. The first settlement was reestablished in Kfar Etzion on September 27th, 1967. After that, a group led by Rav Moshe Levinger and his wife Miriam, Rav Eliezer Waldman, Eliakim Ha'etzny, and others rented the Park Hotel in Hebron on the night of Pesach, Passover 1968. Okay, so we have Kfar Etzion 1967, Hebron 1968. Now, about 100 people participated in that Leil HaSeder, including Benny Katzover, Rav Chaim Druckmann. There were security forces, official security forces that gave him informal support. They also had the backing of the Education Minister Yigal Alon and Defense Minister Moshe Dayan. I want you to remember this. There is support from the government. There's support from the government, and in practice, they stayed on after the Seder night and started this first settlement in Hebron. 1971, they moved into the new neighborhood of Kiryat Arba, near Hebron. 1970, first settlement in Gaza, Kfar Darom. The same year, 1970, we have Alon Shvut, right near Kfar Etzion, a walking distance, 5 to 10 minutes walking distance from Kfar Etzion. Alon Shvut was also established. In other words, what I want to tell you is that several settlements were founded before Gush Emunim. This is very important. The Gush Emunim hasn't existed as a formal political movement yet. After the conquest of large parts of the land in the Six-Day War, there was already fear that some territories might be given up. This even before the Yom Kippur War, okay? So already then, we have some yeshiva students from Merkaz Harav, among them Rav Chaim Steiner, that met with leaders of the Mafdal. Miflaga Datit Leumit, National Religious Party, historically was together with the left. With the left in Israel, it's called Habrit HaHistorit, the historical alliance. And they met with them, and in the late summer of 1967, Rav Tzvi Yehuda published his famous proclamation, Lo Taguru. Lo Taguru, this is very famous. Lo Taguru means do not fear. Lo Taguru, and here it is. You can see it in front of you. Lo Taguru. And you can see that some books that were printed later discussing Rav Tzvi Yehuda's national political approach printed on their front cover Lo Tagur. You can recognize, right? The Lo Taguru proclamation printed on one of the books, Eretz HaTzvi. It's not the only one. Just to teach us, to show us how important this was taken, how important this was seen by Rav Tzvi Yehuda's followers. So in the proclamation, you see here in Hebrew, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook speaks about what is forbidden. He protests that, and I'm quoting, the sin and crime of handing over our land to non-Jews is nothing but a weakness, a lack of faith, nothing more. Another quote, there is absolutely no permission for this Torah prohibition of giving our land to non-Jews. End of quote. His conclusion is therefore, and I'm quoting, every soldier in Israel, meaning IDF soldiers, must prevent and resist this with all courage and strength, and heaven will assist us. אוקיי, על כל איש צבא בישראל למנוע ולעכב את זה בכל אומץ ועוז, ומן השמיים יסייעונו. End of quote. This is a clear call for refusing orders, סירוב פקודה. So keep this in mind, because later, during the disengagement plan, 2005 Gaza, תוכנית ההתנתקות, we will see that within religious Zionism, among Rav Tzvi Yehuda's own followers, there was disagreement. There was a disagreement about whether it was legitimate to call on soldiers to refuse orders during the disengagement from Gush Katif. He also insists that one must not evade the commandment of holding on to our land, the heritage of our ancestors. In other words, this is a mitzvah, a commandment that is upon everyone. It's upon everyone. Okay, I'm looking for some of the Hebrew here. Okay. Now, returning to 1974, Gush Emunim is established, and it represented the leadership of settlement in Samaria, messianic enthusiasm and willingness for sacrifice. Settlements became facts on the ground. Gush Emunim, as we said, founded February, Tu B'Shvat, early 1974. Tu B'Shvat, also very symbolic, right? Planting the trees, a new beginning in the land of Israel. Just a few months after the Yom Kippur War, the name was Gush Emunim in the Mafdal, in the National Religious Party. So it became a wing, part of the Mafdal, a political wing, and it was suggested by, the name was suggested by Rav Chaim Druckmann. There was a meeting at Kfar Etzion, Kibbutz Kfar Etzion. There were graduates of Merkaz Harav Yeshiva, including Moshe Levinger. Again, you'll hear his name. Chaim Druckmann again, Yoel Binun, and Hanan Porat. Remember the name Yoel Binun because we will return to him when we speak about the Rabin assassination. Now, these people and others were gathering and drafting a vision for a movement of national and religious revival. National and religious revival. After the meeting, they updated Rav Tzvi Yehuda and he encouraged them. He did not initiate this, but he did give his blessing to this movement. This was a broad and ambitious vision. Its goal was nothing less than the complete redemption of Israel and ultimately of the entire world. It included the idea that secular Jews would increasingly draw closer to religious observance, the very synthesis that Rav Kook, the father, the elder, has envisioned. And right, one day we have the two trees combined into one tree. The material and the spiritual, the soul infused into the body. And regarding Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, Rav Tzvi Yehuda firmly declared it to be irreversible. Once there is land that is conquered by the Jews, it's irreversible. There is no way, a way that this can be reversed. Gush Emunim was to be the earthly expression of the redemptive movement. Now, also, I wanted to mention, speaking historically, you know that following the Six-Day War, there was also a movement of returnees to religion, Chozrim B'Tshuva. You can read about this. There's a lot of studies. So we should also keep in mind, okay, we're not only speaking about theology here, we're also speaking about history. So these are the years, this is the time when there is a rise in people that are becoming religious. And Gush Emunim see this and they're encouraged. And they say, this is what Rav Tzvi, this is what Rav Kook, the father, Rav Avraham Yitzchak Kook, was talking about. Finally, the land is expanding. People are interested now in becoming religious. They're joining religion. There will be setbacks later. There'll be disappointments. Those will be real challenges. But 1974, still there's this euphoria. So Hanan Porat, in the words of Hanan Porat, Gush Emunim is the longing for God's revelation in settlement. Gush Emunim established Ofra and Kdumim. I think Naama, you're from Kdumim, right? We mentioned Kdumim, and makes repeated attempts to establish Alon Moreh until it succeeded. When Menachem Begin comes to power, only 1977. Remember, we still have a few years before Menachem Begin. So when he comes to Begin, he promises Od harbe alon moreh. Many more alon morehs. Many more alon morehs. And he fulfills that promise. New settlements are founded. Bet El, Elkanah, Kfar Adumim, and more. This success inevitably leads to institutionalization. 1976, the movement Amanah was established to provide bureaucratic and economic organization for the settlement enterprise. In 1980, the Yesha, we mentioned, Yehuda Shomron Aza Council, Moetzet Yesha, was created as an administrative body uniting the heads of the local councils in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. In this way, Gush Emunim gradually became more formalized and bureaucratic, and by the late 1980s, it had ceased to function as a living ideological movement. So in short, Gush Emunim was established after the Yom Kippur War, the organized movement, born out of the earthquake of that war. Why? Because after the Yom Kippur War, there was growing international pressure to give up Sinai and the Golan Heights. A clear example is Rav Tzvi Yehuda's speech in the yeshiva shortly after Gush Emunim was founded. Pardon me. I might take a short break soon, even though I intended to have one long video. So we'll have two videos. On Independence Day 1974. In the presence of Defense Minister Moshe Dayan. There's a very famous paragraph in that speech. Let me read it in Hebrew, then English. החיוב של והורשתם את הארץ וישבתם בה, שהארץ תהיה בידינו, ולא נעזבנה ביד זולתנו מן האומות. לשון קודשו הברורה של הרמב"ן, מצוות עשה דאורייתא, ברורה ומוחלטת כלל ישראלית שעל הארץ הזאת, לכל גבולותיה אנו מחויבים במסירות נפש. כשמגיע מצב של כפייה, אם תהיה מצד הגויים, או אילו חלילה מצד יהודים, בגלל שיבושי פוליטיקה ושיבושי דעות. Now listen to this, those of you who understand Hebrew, those of you who don't worry, I'm going to read the translation in a minute. כולנו מחויבים להרג ולא לעבור. להרג ולא לעבור. על יהודה ושומרון, על רמת הגולן, זה לא ילך בלי מלחמה. מישהו שאל אותי אם ברצוני לעשות מלחמת אחים. אני לא אכנס לטרמינולוגיה ולא אקרא שמות איך יקרא דבר זה, אבל זו עובדה, זה לא ילך, זה לא יעבור בלי מלחמה. על גופותינו ועל איברינו, כולנו, לא הגויים יצליחו בזה, ולא סיבוכים פוליטיים משלנו בשום אופן בעולם. Now it goes on more and more and more. again ייהרג ואל יעבור, שום חשבונות וסיבוכים פוליטיים, שום סידורי ממשלה ושום ביטויי שרים שלנו לא ישנו ולא יועילו בזה. Now, the English, the commandment to um, to conquer the land and dwell in it, that the land remain in our hands and not be left in the hands of other among the nations, as Ramban, Nachmanides, yeah, plainly says, is a positive Torah commandment, clear and absolute for all Israel, all the nation of Israel, the people of Israel. Yeah. Concerning this land and all its borders, we're obligated to give our lives when correction comes, whether from the nations or heaven forbid from Jews, chas v'chalila, yeah, from Jews, because of political shame and confused opinions. We're all bound to die rather than transgress. Over Judea and Samaria, over the Golan Heights, this will not pass without war. Someone asked me, if I wish to make a civil war, I will not enter, I will not refer to terminology. Enter, yeah, I will not speak of terminology. I will not name it, but this is a fact. It will not pass. It will not go through without war. Over our bodies, of all of us, neither the nations, yeah, the Gentiles, nor our own political complications will succeed in this in any way. So, and again, he continues more and more. There is no permission. We did not receive power of attorney from them. This is a Torah commandment. Give your life rather than transgress. No political calculations, no governmental arrangement, no ministerial statements of ours will change that. End of quote. Of course, this raises the question, what is the internal war, the civil war? What is he speaking about? There are softer tones too. For example, in a letter to Shimon Peres, 1975, רב צבי יהודה writes, על יהודה ושומרון תהיה מלחמה פנימית, וכאשר העם כולו יתקומם בזה נגד הממשלה הזאת, כמובן שאינני עם העם כולו, ועם תקומת דבר השם אלוהי ישראל ולא עם הממשלה בכישלונם. Translating, over Judea and Samaria there will also be an internal struggle. And when the whole people arise against this government, of course, I am with the whole people and with the rising of the word of God, and not with a failing government. End of quote. So here we already see him framing this war as the people against the government. Okay? The problem is what happens when it is unclear where the whole people actually stand. That was a major point of dispute among Rav Tzvi Yehuda's followers. One more point that is often missed is the effect of the fighters' discourse, the siach lochamim. What would be the correct translation? Can help me out here. So they're right, the veterans, right? The Yom Kippur veterans. They had these discussions published in a book, Siach Lochamim, and I don't know why this is a bit overlooked, and I want to talk about this. I want to touch upon this. There was a sense of individualism, of doubting the infallibility of the Zionist project. People began to question the righteousness of the path, tzidkat haderech. There was disappointment. There was pain. This is the earthquake of Milchemet Yom Kippur, the Yom Kippur War. Perplexity, mevucha, and a certain humility about the state's capacity to succeed in every situation. So it's not the euphoria of the Six-Day War anymore. And this, and alongside in the 70s in Israel, the returnees to religion, we have another growing movement of New Age. and we have Shalom Achshav, Peace Now, emerging, and the peace movements. And this brings us to Gush Emunim's founding document you can see in front of your eyes. Notice the settlements were only part of the vision, not even the first priority. Look at the issues. You see the issues that are mentioned. Those of you who can read Hebrew, those of you who not, I will tell you what is written here: education and public outreach, chinuch vehasbara. Bet echad, yeah, BA. You can see here in the document. Love of Israel, Ahavat Israel. That's number 2. Immigration, Aliyah. And only after that, number 4, is Hityashvut, settlement. After this slide, we're gonna take a break, then I'll share another video. Even in the explanations for the founding of Gush Emunim, what is mentioned first, you can also see this here, is the decline in immigration to Israel and the increase in those leaving the country. And only afterwards, the government's denial of the Jewish people's right to the land of Israel. One more point, and then we'll take a break. I think that is why some people like Rav Tzvi Tau, remember his name please, born 1938, agreed to join at the start of Gush Emunim, but then quickly withdrew when settlements became the central story. They felt Gush Emunim moved too fast, disconnected from the will of the majority of the people of Israel. Theology of Eretz Yisrael Shlema, the entire land of Israel, the biblical borders of Israel belong to the Jews. They agreed. Of course, they agreed with that. But the question is, what are we, the followers of Rav Tzvi Yehuda, focusing on? Another settlement, or settling in the hearts, right? I think I even recommended you read a book titled Settlement in the Hearts, Hitnachalut Belevavot. Are we running too fast, ahead of ourselves, leaving the majority of the people of Israel confused, angry, feeling misled? What is happening? How should we act? They thought, so some people thought, some of the followers, it should be pursued more slowly and with broader consent. Okay, now we will move on, but I'll take a short break and then we will continue. Thank you.